Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Renee Peaty from Striven. And for those who haven't heard of us, we're your one-stop shop for everything from curated professional development content to coaching, mentoring, networking, and courses. And every month we hold a webinar tackling big themes, and creativity is our theme for May. So in today's competitive job market, the traditional formulaic approach to recruitment isn't working. And to stand out, you need to infuse creativity into the candidate experience, transforming it into an engaging journey that attracts top talent and reflects your company's culture. And to help us better understand how we can infuse creativity into the candidate experience at all different stages, we have invited Michael Rubio, who is our guest speaker for today. So Michael is a career coach and managing partner of talent development and strategy at DMCG Global. And along with helping job seekers level up their career, Michael partners with scaling startups on their talent strategy, working from their talent attraction strategy through to onboarding, talent engagement, and employer branding. Thanks for joining us today, Michael.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me on. Really keen to chat with you guys about creativity and talent acquisition.
Awesome.
I will jump straight in. I think the reason why I think it's so important, so vital that recruiters and talent acquisition professionals take a creative approach is because, first off, I think for a lot of brands, a lot of companies, talent acquisition recruitment, the job market is going to be the first time any candidates have an experience with your brand. Unless you're a direct-to-consumer company, you've got a retail arm or something like that, often the recruitment process is the first time that any candidate has an experience with your company. So you're really at the coalface of telling the story of your brand. It's really the first time sometimes people will meet an actual person, a staff member from your company. So it's crucial that we approach this in a way that's creative, innovative, tells a great story, but also values the person. I want to share a few, core principles that I think are crucial across any system or process, any industry that you're in, any kind of company it works across any of these. But I think the first principle that I wanted to share about bringing creativity into the process is taking a human-centered design approach. So leading our systems with empathy, I think, is crucial. Like you mentioned, the current system for recruitment, it can be pretty broken. You only need to jump onto LinkedIn for a few seconds and scroll through the feed, and there's a lot of people that are really struggling with job seeking. They're really hurting from the job seeking grind. They're getting a lot of just really robotic kind of processes. There's a lot of misconceptions and even blatant kind of lies that are coming out just because the process is so bad. People are getting really frustrated. So I think if we were to think about how we can bring creativity into the process to make it better, lead with empathy and think about your processes from a human point of view. At what touch point are the humans interacting with you as a person, as your brand, with your systems and processes? And here's a few questions I think that anyone can ask about your systems and processes to make sure that you are designing properly for this. The first question is, what questions are your candidates asking through the whole process? That might be before they apply, when they see a job ad pop up or when they see your company post something on LinkedIn. What questions does the candidate have about you as a company, you as a brand, you as an employer? And how can you potentially answer some of those questions throughout the process in a meaningful, impactful way? The next one's massive is, what are the most frustrating aspects of your recruitment process for them? So really from the outset, if you're hiring right now, if you're recruiting and you've got a careers page, you've got a job ad up, do yourself a favor, go and apply for that job yourself. If you're the recruiter, if you're the CEO or the founder of the company, click apply on LinkedIn and see how many steps it takes you through. How long does it actually take you to put your application in? You may be actually completely surprised. I did this myself last year for some previous companies that I worked for, and I couldn't believe how long and how slow the process was to setting up a new user login, creating a password, verifying the email, uploading your CV, adding the additional information, then going through adding your education. Then it's just so many different steps just to apply, just to say I'm interested in this job. So ask yourself, what is the most frustrating process for your applicants? Is it the application process? Maybe your application process is pretty good. Is it the actual interview process? Have you got a 5 to 6 stage interview process with unrealistic expectations? Have a think through those points, map that out and identify where those pain points are, because If it's too much friction, I guarantee you're losing really good talent. You might still get really high volumes of applicants. You might look at your job ad and you're saying, oh, awesome, we're still getting, 100, 200, 300 applicants. But if you've got really bad processes, I guarantee you the top 1% applicants, those candidates that you really want to be speaking to, they're going to be dropping off. They're not going to waste their time. Next question to think about here. Oh, sorry, you asked a question.
I was just going to ask, are there any opportunities to sort of gather those sorts of metrics from the candidates themselves as they go through the process? And what are some good ways of trying to glean those insights? Is it during interview? I guess if they're interviewing with a business, they might not want to talk about what is frustrating to them. Or is it best just to do it yourself, in the sense of putting yourself in the position of the applicant or the candidate and moving through that process? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's definitely a really good exercise to do. Put yourself through that process, especially even if you're not the actual recruiter, you're a hiring manager, or you could even get potentially someone external to do like a ghost application just to see what their experience is, how long they're actually taking. Do they get, even just this morning, I was doing a post on LinkedIn about confirmation emails. Personally, I think they're pointless. I don't care if someone says, thank you for applying for the job. But I was quite surprised on LinkedIn. A lot of people really appreciate those because it helps them track what jobs they've applied for, when they applied for it, when they should follow up. They know the application's gone through. So different systems like that.
That's a big thing, isn't it? Has my application gone into the system, whatever the system is? Is it part of the ATS or not? So I kind of think, they do seem a bit kind of boring in one or two lines, but it's good for them to know that, yeah, okay, I'm in the mix.
Yeah, 100%. The other point to answer your question about how you can measure that and track that is definitely, as you're speaking with candidates, you can just off the cuff just ask them how they've found the application process, or once they get an offer, you can get feedback from them. But I think measuring candidate experience in some sort of formal feedback is a really good thing to do. Like I know at Canva, we had culture ramp surveys that go out to everyone, people that were successful as well as people that weren't successful. And that's just a really great way to get that constant loop of people saying, this feedback was terrible, or this process was great, I love this process. And we're able to kind of measure that, track that, see where the pain points were, and kind of make sure that we're constantly improving and iterating to get a really great candidate experience. Because at the end of the day, if you have people that most people that apply for your job, you're going to have to reject. They're not going to get the job. But if you can have a good candidate experience for those people that don't get the job, they can still become brand ambassadors and even, talent ambassadors. And that's a really valuable thing.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's one of those things, when you do have a bad experience as a candidate, it really affects the way you perceive the brand generally.
100%, it does. Some of the other points, I think, the questions that you can ask around taking a human-centered design approach is, even like if you talk about questions the hiring team are asking, making sure that from the outset you're aware of those. I talked about this one already. When it comes to testing new things, I think we'll talk about that maybe a bit more on the next slide, on the next kind of principle. But yeah, that's the first principle is empathy, taking a human-centered design approach. I think that's where you can get really creative. You don't necessarily need to have big budgets, massive resources to just think through that process and plan out how you're hiring in a way that really values people's time, values people's effort. Because at the end of the day, if someone's applied for your company to be a part of your company, they've expressed interest, they've put time and effort in, they should be valued. They should be, treated well and not ghosted. Definitely. That's kind of like the bottom of the bar, is just don't ghost people. If they apply, everyone that applies should hear back feedback. Usually it's going to be generic. Like if you can create some more tailored feedback, that's really nice. It's not always practical, but that's kind of where that one stands.
I do think that, candidates, when they're applying for a job, they're in a pretty vulnerable position, right? In particularly in today's market, it's pretty rough out there for a lot of candidates. So kind of stepping into their shoes and understanding how they're feeling and what they're thinking, and, they're probably a bit anxious, moving through that recruitment process. I think empathy is so important.
Definitely. And I think too, personally for me, I remember it was quite a few years ago, I remember I got right through the last stage of the interview process with what I thought was my dream job, and ended up not getting the job. And it was totally devastating for me. But I'm so glad that happened, because, if you've only had good experiences in recruitment, it can maybe taint the way you think about these things. So coming
Yeah.
from where I've had, major disappointments in the job application process helps you really, put yourself in other people's shoes and think about, okay, what is that experience actually like to that human? Like, what's their situation? And it can be a hard one in recruitment because it can be so mechanical, and people sometimes it's so I don't know, procedural. So the human element can often be lost.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it feels a little bit like a numbers game, and
Yeah,
you're just another number, and they're looking for a particular fit, I guess, and you may or may not fit it. But yeah, obviously, if you're applying for a job, you're already invested in that company and working for that company, and maybe imagining working there one day.
definitely. So if I think about the next kind of key principle of incorporating creativity into the recruitment process, I think it's around innovation. And when I say innovation, I don't just mean like innovation for innovation's sake. I think a lot of companies potentially are at risk of just adding in tools, tech tools, just stuff, just shoving AI into their processes to try and make it seem like there's innovation. I think that needs to be done with a consideration, again, similar to the previous point, like based off data. Like if you think about data as one of the key things on how you want to innovate, you need to be thinking about what's the data that you need to be measuring, and how do you know where you should be innovating in the process. And the next point is experimentation. So once you've looked at that data and you've heard feedback about the process, how can you experiment and test and iterate some of the processes that you have to try and keep improving? And sometimes you have to do a bit of an A/B test to see how that works. That can be with, if you're trying to be innovative about the job ad process, maybe you're tweaking the way you write job ads. How can you test that compared to another job ad to see, if you look at the data, how the drop-offs are, the percentage that go through to the apply rate, some of those kind of things, because sometimes you're going to iterate and it's going to be a worse experience. You're going to try and implement a new software or tool, and it's going to add more steps, more complication. But if you think about innovation, how can you innovate some of the manual processes that are slow, that are time consuming, with technology? There is a lot of really great technology out there. Especially, I think some of the easy wins are around, automated scheduling, things like that. It saves so much time for everyone in the hiring process if you can implement some ways that make it easier for candidates to automatically schedule themselves in for an interview if they're progressing. And then some of the automations around, feedback, like we talked about. Ghosting's the worst thing you can do. If you have some of those systems automated, it can really help. So it's not such a manual process it could be quite a under-resourced talent acquisition professional or HR person in a company. If you can automate some of that process and make it easier for yourself, and that can really help as well.
I feel sometimes that the candidate attraction process is an area where there isn't a ton of innovation. And I don't really know why that is. I don't know if it's kind of like, people have sort of done the same thing for a long period of time and just sort of stuck with it. I don't know what your thoughts are with that, but my perception is that there's a bit of a lack of innovation.
Yeah, I think there is. I think recruitment has been done the same way for a long time. You just post a job ad up and see who comes, see who applies, and then reach out to them. I think there is a lot of opportunity for innovation in that space, and there's been some cool ways that people have been rethinking a little bit about that. There's some new software platforms that are trying to reshape the whole market. So rather than just applying for jobs, you can set up a bit more of a detailed profile of yourself so jobs can kind of come to you. It's yet to be seen how this all kind of plays out. I think over the next 5 years, we definitely will see a bit of a shift. I think what LinkedIn's done already has changed some elements of that, where, there's certain people and professions that just don't need to worry about applying for jobs because they're in a pretty
The
candidate
niche in
market.
demand. Yeah.
Yeah, all they need to do is keep their profile updated with the relevant certifications or skills or experience that they have. And when it gets time for them to move, there'll be people kind of lined up waiting to chat with them. And that will depend on the market, the economy. If there's an overflow of talent, then you're still going to have to go through and apply for jobs. But I think, as digital profiles, LinkedIn profiles kind of add out, and as I think skills-based hiring potentially improves in how we kind of measure and quantify skills, hopefully I think some of that will change. I think CVs will slowly start to be phased out, But
Yeah.
as it stands at the moment, it is very much still kind of stuck in that process. But there is definitely opportunities for innovation. I think depending on who the audience is here, who's listening and watching, there's opportunities for people to be more creative in how they really go to market with jobs, how they really want to receive applications. Like, is it just a CV? Do you just want to see a PDF document? Is that enough? Is there ways to, maybe if it's a high volume role, see a different kind of application where, if you're testing for things that are especially around soft skills, your verbal communication, personality, those kind of things are crucial to this role, then yeah, I think it's worth innovating around, okay, what do we actually want to see from the outset? Like, do we have to wait to the first interview, to the recruiter screen call to actually assess some of this stuff? Or can we assess that from the outset in the interview process? So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of room to be played with in the innovation space in talent attraction.
All right, awesome.
Let me move on to the next slide, which I'm super passionate about, visual communication. For me, I'm a very visual learner. So there's been plenty of times I've found people would just talk info at me and it just goes completely over my head. So I really appreciate when someone talks to me with some kind of visual communication way, something I can see, something I can kind of follow along with. Recruitment, pretty typically is the opposite way. It's very verbal. You jump on a phone call with someone, you talk through a large amount of data. The recruiter will give you a brief about the company, and you've got to try and remember that, analyze that, ask questions about that. If we think about visual communication, I've been a big advocate of this for a long time from a lot of different sources. So when you start advertising straight away, I think you should be telling a visual story, not just a written job ad. You should be communicating your company, your values in visual ways, not just written ways, not just verbal ways. And then when it comes to context before they get to an interview, that's something that I think that Canva does really well in the recruitment process. Is if you apply for a job at Canva and you're accepted to interviews, there's a good chance you're going to get a lot of visual communication straight away from the careers page, then sent to you via email, a lot of context that's really rich. So you can do your own research, but you're also going to have a lot of that context that you can just review straight away. Some of the things that I really like that I think are really, really powerful ways to bring in visual communication in recruitment is having team decks, having company decks. So a lot of companies have this already. Some don't, but I think it can really help even from an attraction point of view. So if you spend the time and effort, I've got some resources actually that I can share after this that are just templates, but they're really great templates. They're based off the similar kind of ones that, Meta, Google, Atlassian, Canva are all using. So it's very similar kind of format. But you can kind of look through and just very easily just drop and drag your own imagery, your own vision statements, your own team decks. And those kind of things, if you think about the process from a candidate perspective, being given some of that visual communication, that context straight from the outset, for myself as a recruiter, it actually saved me a lot of time in the recruiter calls because, every candidate wants to ask the same questions. What's the team like? Who's this role report to? What are the key objectives of this company or this team? If you can answer that from the outset, you're saving time and you're also delivering a far better experience. So I'd be thinking about visual communication throughout the whole process, from the job application stage to the interview stage to when it comes to any kind of offer negotiations or the actual offer, then the onboarding stage. How can you incorporate visual communication to make it more efficient, but also a much better creative experience for people? So I'd be leaning on things like Canva decks, Notion wikis. You can do Loom videos. Some of those things are really cool ways to bring some optimization there.
Michael, you lost me with, was it Notion wikis?
Yeah, so you can set up Notion documentation where it's maybe not as visual as like a Canva doc, but it still incorporates visual elements into there and have a lot of like, I don't know, I quite like the way Notion structures some of the documentation. So you could have a whole candidate deck, which would be a Notion, a number of different pages about who we are, our company, our values, how we hire, the recruitment process, the kind of interview questions you'll get asked. So you can kind of really prepare your candidates before they get to that stage.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's just putting them in the best position and also, best position for interview, but also, gives them more information to help them make a decision. Is this the company for me?
100%.
Yeah, and for a brand like Canva, I can imagine how well that aligns to their employer brand as well, presenting things in a really interesting, compelling visual way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for even any other company that's not, Canva's obviously based on all about visual communication, but it'll help any company to communicate better because, if you're just going to send people an email, this is about us, this is who we are, compared to actually seeing, like, you can communicate so much more seeing a team photo. Just like I've done some employer branding work with earlier stage startups. They don't have big marketing teams. They don't have big budgets, but they've did a Christmas party, and like incorporating a photo of their Christmas party into some of the collateral that is sending out to their candidates is straight away creating that more personal approach. It's almost like pulling the veil behind their kind of more corporate persona, their corporate brand, and saying, no, actually, we're just real people. This is who we are. This is what we're all about. So yeah, I think it's a powerful way to communicate.
Yeah, and vibe is a bit of an overused term, but it's one of those things where you can really get an essence of who the team are, what the structure's like, about the culture, whether that's a good alignment for you. So yeah, no, that sounds interesting. I'm interested in seeing those templates.
Yeah, definitely. And look, following on from visual communication, I think storytelling is crucial as well. So if we think about the power of storytelling, it's this really, from a recruitment point of view, this is where you're going to really win hearts and minds, where you're going to make people fall in love with your brand. You can have really pretty marketing collateral, everything can look really schmick. But if you're not telling a compelling story, if you're not creating emotional connections, you're going to lose people still. You can have really great candidates go through the whole recruitment process and you can make an offer. But if they don't love your brand, if they don't love the purpose, the impact that you're having in the world, the chances are, if your top talent has the opportunity to be a bit selective, they would, in most cases, most demographics of people are going to be really driven by the kind of purpose, the kind of emotional connection they have with the company. And so in a lot of cases, most people would prefer to go for a company that's going to have a greater impact over the company that might have the really snazzy marketing material and have the clout and kudos. That's not always the case, but I think if you can think about your story as a brand, as a company, and again, things you can lean on here is authenticity over big budget. And I think this works really well for, especially for startups or smaller stage companies that don't have those full resources, can really lean into authentic storytelling. So if you think about the first point here, emotional connection. So use real people stories, create an emotional connection. What stories can you tell about real employees, their growth, and create a showcase of professional development opportunities? So rather than just, have on your careers page, you say, we value this, we want to see you advance your career, we've got competitive salary. If you can bring real people's stories into that, then you're going to help them cheer on the current employees. They're going to see that emotional connection that's going to really resonate much far deeper. And the second one is, oh,
Seeing it
sorry.
in action, yeah, I was just going to say it's a little bit like it's all right to say that you value career progression and L&D and things like that, but it's a little bit like seeing it in action is so much more impactful. You're actually doing it, and how are you doing it, and what sort of difference has that made to someone's career as well. Also, there are a lot of businesses that sort of say this and that, but doesn't actually, when it's time for the rubber to hit the road, don't necessarily deliver on some of their promises.
Yeah, 100%. And like savvy job seekers, they're going to be looking at your LinkedIn profiles. They're looking at the people in your LinkedIn, how long have they worked at your company for? And they can see, they'll look and they'll see, okay, this person's been at your company for 4 years and they've had the same job title for 4 years, junior marketing associate. There's been no progression, there's been no promotion, no advancement. Or they can see and they see, oh yeah, everyone stays there for 1 year and they move straight away because they're trying to get, trying to progress their career. So definitely tell those stories. The next one is to bring your values to life. So like you said, rather than just listing your company values or just talk is cheap, how can you tell a story that illustrates your values and actions? So something I find when working with companies really bringing out their employer value proposition and telling that story well is values can be really cheap because every company has good values. Like I've yet to see any company exist that lists their company values that are bad values. No one says they've got bad values. Everyone says they've got good values. So that talk is cheap. How can you instead tell stories about what your company has done in the world, or show examples of where your staff have demonstrated this value, where your leadership have really stepped up? So if honesty, if integrity, if all these kind of things, being a positive force of impact in the world, if these are things that your company really values, you should be able to tell stories about that. So again, I would do that visually with a video or with a photo, but find a real story to connect with that, to make it real, make it tangible. And that's where, people will sense authenticity, and they'll sense marketing. You know what I mean? Like, I think even though we're talking about creativity and talent acquisition, I want to be careful that, I'm not encouraging people to spend, huge, big budgets on these massive employer value, employer branding, collateral. They don't have to go to marketing agencies to get professional videos all done up. That's not what it's about. It's about authentically telling your story in creative, innovative ways. And the last point here is brand identity. So again, sharing videos and stories that highlight your company's mission, the impact that your work is having in more relatable ways and distinct ways. I think that's something, again, is how to connect with people is, what does your company actually do in the world? Like, what's the impact it has on the end customer? And again, pulling from, Canva examples, I think they did this really well. One of the highlights from my first day at Canva was we had our all staff meeting with, I think, maybe 2,000 people. But the 5 minutes before the meeting actually started, they just had a Twitter roll going of hashtag Canva love. And for me, as a new starter at a company, I was like, this is really cool. Like, I'm not going to be interacting with many of our users per se. I'm going to be dealing with candidates that are applying. But just to read through a stream of, this is what our customers actually think about our product. This is how it's actually affecting them. This is how they're using our product to make a startup, or make their own business, or start their own non-for-profit, or to really advocate for their cause. And that really, I think, connected me to the mission in a really powerful way. So how can you use storytelling to connect your mission as a company to what potentially this candidate can be a part of if they join your company?
100%. And I think that people do want to, they want to connect with a mission, like you said, or a sense of purpose, something greater than just themselves, and something that also has a really nice sort of correlation to their own personal values as well, and feel that you kind of, I'm on board for this, I'm in it for the long haul. This is a really good fit for me. And also, in terms of what you were talking about with products, I think it's so important to work for a product or service that where you really work for a business where they have products and services that really do the job. You believe in them, they work well, they have a really good function, they have a really good result for their customers. They're doing great things in the world. So all of that is really important.
Yeah, 100%. And let me see, I think that's the last slide I've got. Yeah, that's the last slide I've got. So I think, again, to really emphasize, maybe summarize and recap, I think any team from any budget, if you're hiring, if you're recruiting right now, I want to encourage you to lean into creativity. Think about the human process. Think about any kind of data innovation that you can do, but then think about, back to the human point of view. The reason why humans want to deal with humans in the recruitment process, not AI, is because we crave that connection. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to and valued. So, as much AI innovation is out there and streamlining things and all of this kind of stuff is great. I'm all for it. I love it. Humans want to connect with humans. And if you're thinking about joining a new workplace, how can you really tell your story and let candidates tell their story in an authentic way for them as well?
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Michael. Now, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to pop them in the chat, and Michael can answer those for you. So, in terms of the templates that you were talking about, some of the templates that were used for visual storytelling when you're at Canva, what is the best? You said you might have either some downloadables or some resources. What are some of the best ways for people to access those?
Yeah, awesome. I'm happy to share that with anyone who is keen to see some of that. I've got some inspirational things there of companies that are kind of leading the way with their resources, as well as some templates that are really easy, quick and easy. Just jump in, just slap your photos, your relevant stuff in there. Maybe just email me at michael@dmcgglobal.com. and I'll be happy to share that with you as well. That's yeah, I think there's a lot of potential value there for people that are hiring and just want to get started and see how to do it really well. And there's a lot of different options there for how you can choose what works best for your brand.
All right, fantastic. What are some brands that you feel, aside from maybe Canva, because I imagine, in terms of those sort of, you know, amazing or, really attractive employers out there, like Canva would be one of those. What are some businesses that you've seen that might not necessarily be the Metas and the Googles and the Canvas of the world, but are doing some really great things, with smaller budgets, smaller teams, but you really have been impressed with the innovation or the net result?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of startups that are doing some cool innovations and thinking around that human-centered design piece and looking at how they can value people through the process. So, and this changes for every different company and what you can offer. For some companies, it might be a bit harder, but a lot of companies that I'm seeing at the moment doing really well, they're kind of offering something back to their candidates. So, if someone interviews at your company, how can you value their time with what you have that's free to give? So one of the clients I'm working with is a up and coming pet nutrition company. And through the interview process, obviously there's a lot of pet owners that are really drawn to those jobs. So they're looking at incorporating, how can we incorporate, free gifts of some of our premium pet product to everyone candidate that interviews with us so that we're valuing their time, giving something
That's
valuable for them. Yeah, again, Canva did that with like free 6 month trials for Canva Pro. I'm hearing of other companies like what is it? There's companies that do startup ecosystem co-working spaces, and candidates that interview with them, they're giving free co-working spaces seats for 6 months as well. So there's a level of value there that people can receive as well, and it makes them brand advocates. Apart from that, there's some other companies doing great work, winning awards in IDA do awards for the best kind of candidate experience, the best talent teams. I think this year Green Cross Pet Wellness won that. Immutable did really well, as well as some of the big, larger corporates like Optus and Coles, and some of the work that those teams are doing as well.
awesome. We've just got a question that's come through from Laura. You mentioned some tech that was helping to change the application process. Can you recommend any tech platforms for us to check out?
Anything specifically, I think it depends on your budget and what your goals are. So I probably wouldn't give any blanket recommendations, but I think one thing that I've found extremely useful that I think is great from a point of candidate experience and time saving optimization is just having some kind of AI auto transposer in recruiter screens and interviews. I think it just makes sense. Like you have to check obviously the privacy and data and make sure everything's in check there. But if you have some kind of like usually when I'm recruiting, and if I'm in a recruiter screen call, like all day we're just meeting people, and we want to make sure that we take as many notes as possible. So I'm usually furiously typing away as quickly as I can to capture everything in the interview. But now with the power of AI is incredible at note taking, just taking back notes and then summarizing that. Having the ability to have an AI transcriber can really help make sure you never lose anything. Everything's documented, recorded. You've got all that data. You can share things with the hiring team. Again, you can see what the hiring team are kind of doing as well, and check and have all that data there. So I think that's a real game changer for recruitment. There's different applicant tracking systems that are using AI in like some of the sorting and filing of candidates and kind of trying to recommend the best candidates for a job. I don't know how much I'd necessarily recommend some of that stuff at the moment. Some of it's good. Some of it can be handy. Nothing's really foolproof though. Like I've used those tools before, and they can be sometimes really helpful. Sometimes they're not very helpful. So from a time saving point of view, maybe it's a bit hit and miss. Depends with who you're working with. So I won't name any brands there. Other ways I think that AI can really help in the recruitment process, things like improving job adverts, like making sure that your job adverts are really diverse, they're targeting the right audience, they're written in good ways. Leaning on the power of AI in that process can really help, speed things up, as well as like there's some quite cool things you can do with large language models now with your tone of voice. So you might hate writing job descriptions, job adverts. You might have a technical hiring manager who gives you this massive, big 3-page long job description. If your company has a brand, tone, voice, documentation or guideline, you can feed some of that into AI and tell it to rewrite it with this, brand, tone of voice. You can feed it specific things around diversity and inclusion, the kind of language you want to be using, making sure that it's incorporating that, making sure that it isn't excluding certain categories of people. Like a lot of job ads are written with a really kind of male tone of voice. So there's some tools that will analyze that, things like Textio, which can be quite useful. So there's a lot of tools out there. It's constantly evolving. I've been chatting with companies doing like AI pre-screening interviews as well. So that's an interesting space. I don't know yet. I think it's all very up in the air to see what's actually going to land and stick and add value and improve the process rather than make it more complicated. But yeah, we'll see.
Stay tuned.
Definitely stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you so much for today, Michael. We haven't had any more questions come through, so we'll wrap it there. But I really appreciate your time today. And if anyone is interested in hearing more about this space, they can connect with you directly on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much for having me, Renee. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.